So, I mean, for parents, it's quite a daunting space to enter the digital world, and I think that's why they leave their kids to their own devices. Is that why kids are more vulnerable or susceptible to dangers online?
Well, of course, we give our children all these powerful devices, but children are not born responsible users of those devices, and we have to raise them up to be tech savvy so that they use them wisely and that they make the best possible choices for themselves to protect themselves in any given situation.
So, what are the dangers and the threats of our children being on social media platforms like TikTok or Twitter or Instagram?
Well, all of these platforms work because kids like to communicate. They like to connect, and they like to connect en masse and quickly. They're also seeking attention. So this is a great place to get attention. They also want a piece of the action, even if it's just 15 seconds of fame. You know, they'll do anything for 15 seconds of fame, for some followers, for some likes, for some friends, some connections. But that's really a misnomer, because those followers are not necessarily friends. Most of the people who are following our kids do not know. And that's one of the things that we have to teach our children. As parents, we have to step into this zone. We have to bridge the digital divide with more conversations that matter and fewer speeches that don't.
So then what can I do as a parent? My child comes to me, I find out that he's on TikTok, I find out that he's on another social media platform. What are the things that I should do immediately, practical steps to make sure that my child is safe and online, having a good time but still protected?
There are some fundamental basics that apply to every single social media platform. And parents have to take responsibility for imparting this information to children. I can't tell you how often I am accosted by parents at sporting events at schools asking me if I would go and teach the teachers how to keep their children safe online. I counter that with a question. What kind of cell phone does your child have? Is it a smartphone, an internet-linked smartphone? And the answer is usually yes. And these are like grade 5s and 6s. And I say, and who bought the phone? And they say, I did. And then the penny drops. And I say, well, whose responsibility is it really to teach your kids how to be safe online? Is it the school's or is it yours? And in our book, Tech Savvy Parenting, Arthur Goldstack and I talk very much about the fact that your relationship with your children is probably the biggest safety factor that you can give your children. It's better for them than an app. You know, you can get apps that can prevent your children from accessing certain sites and porn and things like that. But you know, kids are savvy. They can get around most things today.
Because I think that's what we're trying to make sure is that I can't be with my child 24/7. I'm not with him and his phone night and day. So even when he's on his own, he needs to be making the right choices, correct?
That's right. So this is what we have to do with our children. We have to teach them to make the best possible choice when we are not there to run interference for them. When we are not there to say, don't do this and don't do that. Increasingly, as children get older, they go to another person's house for a play date, for a sleepover, as they get into their teens, to parties, to restaurants, to pubs, to clubs. You are not going to be there. They go on camps, they go on tours with a cell phone. And we give them these devices because we want to be in contact, for convenience, because we're afraid that our children might need to call us in an emergency. But we're not thinking about all the other things that they can actually get up to on their devices. And sometimes it's not our children getting up to mischief. The world just happens to connect with them. Stranger danger online has to be discussed. We are so good at teaching children how to protect themselves in the real world. I run digital safety workshops for children in schools, starting from grade 3, believe it or not.
What?
Grade 3, because people are handing down the second-hand smartphone to their children. So they are giving their children an incredibly powerful device that can access everything unless you've put certain blocks in place. So when I run these digital safety workshops, I actually ask the kids, how have your parents taught you to keep safe in the real world? And you know, they throw out examples left, right, and center. Don't run with knives, don't play with guns, don't play with fire, don't catch lifts with strangers, don't take sweets from strangers, and they go on and on. We've drummed it into them. But because digital, we can't see, touch, and feel it, we feel we don't know what to say to our children. But we need to talk to them in very concrete terms. Like, for example, I say to these kids, would you please go up onto the stage and take your clothes off? And they look at me as if I'm nuts. No! And I say, but then why are you sharing naked selfies on social media platforms when more than 300 people or 500 people are going to see that? Where you cannot control the message. The minute you've published something, whether it's on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, whatever it is, you've published, it is in the public domain. And the internet never forgets. Even if you have a stab of conscience and you go back in and delete that picture or take it off WhatsApp, the picture that you sent your girlfriend or your boyfriend, you don't know how many times it's already been forwarded and shared. And you can never get that back, ever. And that's what kids say they learned that they never knew before, is that the internet never forgets.
As you're talking, I'm thinking, is there an upside to our children being on social media? Can't I just send them outside to play with cars and bricks and sand? Is there an upside? Is there an opportunity? Are there good places, for our kids to socialize on these social media platforms? Or it just sounds all doom and gloom?
It's not all doom and gloom at all. It's just about knowing the rules of engagement. And it's about knowing that you should never share anything or say anything you wouldn't do to somebody's face. So is there any upside to social media and children connecting online? Well, I think COVID-19 has shown us that there's definitely a place for socializing online. It's been our children's only way to socialize for many, many weeks, not weeks, months now. Multiplayer online games have been a way for kids to socialize and have play dates. And then using social media apps to connect, whether it's house party, whether it's TikTok, whatever it is, to actually find their friends and crowdsource their friends and all be in the same place at the same time, has given them that sense of belonging and togetherness in a virtual way. The getting together online is not the problem. The gathering is not the problem. It's the type of content they share and what they say, and that's what they've got to be careful about. So technology is neutral. The internet is neutral. It's what we as human beings do with it that makes it positive or negative.
I mean, the world is dealing with so many social issues. We're in a pandemic right now, so the coronavirus is sweeping the globe. We're talking about huge inequalities. Black Lives Matter marches are going on. Are our children, our teens, aware of social issues? Are those social issues important to them? Are they discussing those things online or not? Are they aware that when they say something that's perhaps racist, or if they say something that's transphobic, do they call each other out on it? Are they socialized? Are they aware? Are they switched on? Are they woke?
Are they woke? Yeah. Well, that's a very interesting question, because right now we've seen all of those issues are bubbling up. I speak to a lot of teens. They are very, very aware of these social issues that are being discussed. And I think back to my childhood when I was so sheltered because of the kind of government we had at the time, the regime we had at the time, that I didn't even know that apartheid was a thing until I left this country at the age of 17. Our kids know what's going on because of 24-hour news reporting, because of social media. So that would be one of the upsides, is that our kids are informed. One of the downsides is how much of what they see is fake news. And learning to be discerning. So what are the kinds of skills our children can learn through social media? Learning to be discerning, critical thinkers, learning to communicate clearly and honestly, learning what diversity is, learning about bias, and learning how to work within that framework. learning that they need to be careful what they say, and to say it in a way that doesn't harm anybody else, even if it's expressing their opinion. They need to be careful. There's another side to it that's also quite tricky right now, is that we've got a whole cohort of kids who are scared to voice their opinion in case there's a backlash against what they say. You and I are on social media, we're in the public eye. We also know we have to be very careful about how we phrase what we say. But we have many more years of life experience, many years of being practiced at choosing our words, at choosing how we say things, the tone of our voice, and who we say it to. Our children are at a disadvantage in that they have limited life experience, and that means that parents need to be around. You cannot just give your child a smartphone and never think about it again. You have to be having the conversations with your kids when they're young. You're talking those grade 3s that I spoke about, right through into the early teens. You need to be checking out, what are your kids doing online, searching their history, having a contract, an agreement with your children about our wishes for you around the use of your device, our responsibilities and your responsibilities. And in that contract, it spells out what will happen if you abuse your airtime, if you abuse being online, if you hurt other people, etc. So when you actually remove a device or cut off their airtime, it's not you being the ogre. It's your child making a choice based on the agreement that they signed. So one should never be giving a smart device to a child with whom you cannot have a conversation about a 3-page contract. That's actually quite simple, really. If your child is not ready to be bullied online, they shouldn't have a smartphone. Is an 8-year-old ready to be bullied online? No. Even a 13, 14, 15-year-old who gets bullied online is in pieces, or who is repeatedly hounded for a naked selfie by somebody who purports to love them. And so sometimes what happens is kids get worn down after 53 requests to a 13-year-old girl for a naked selfie. She gives up, she gives in, she sends it. And then she has to change her identity, her name, because that got shared everywhere. And those are the kinds of conversations we need to be having with our children. This is what can happen. If you share a naked selfie, once it's gone, it's gone. You can never get it back. And this is where it can land up. We have to read as parents. We have to listen. We have to attend talks by many different speakers and authors on this topic. Children need to hear these speakers and authors. Every year, schools get in different people to say the same thing. And we still need to say it over and over again. Because what we're doing with kids is we're scenario planning. What if this should happen? Then what might you do? And if you do that with your children, they have a blueprint. So that if something goes down, they go, I've been there before. I know what to do. Giving them a plan of action should something happen. And it might just be to give them the plan of action that if they see one of their friends being cyberbullied, that they know how to deal with that. Because the person being bullied, I promise you, is in a bad space. And they're so embarrassed, and they don't know what to do, and they don't call for help. So are we going to bring up our children to be upstanders or bystanders? To stand up for their friends and to call for help, an adult. And even if you as a parent don't know everything, you will find somebody who does. And that's what they need to know, that they can come to you to discuss anything, even if it's a friend who's in trouble, and you will help. I think what I'd like to say to parents is you don't have to know everything about every app.
Right.
Take a breath. Remember, what your kids really want is a really strong, deep relationship with you. And the basics apply. Look at age restrictions, they're there for a reason. When your children first go onto social media, You need to put fairy wheels on them, just like you would put on a two-wheeler bicycle when they first got on the bicycle. You need to travel closely with them for the first 6 months to make sure that they're making the right kind of choices, decisions, and actions. And once you're happy with that, you can start letting go of those kite strings a little bit more. But they need to know that if you pick up their phone at any given time, you must have their password, otherwise the phone gets taken away.
The deal is off.
The deal is, the phone's off the table. And your kids need to know that if you pick up their phone and you find something there that shouldn't be there, it's your right as a parent to actually check up on them because they're still in your care.
So should parents be worried about TikTok specifically, having their children on TikTok?
Claire, TikTok is just the latest in a string of social media apps. And of course, any new app has got more dangers than the older apps because it hasn't been around for long enough and people haven't demanded the whole data privacy, all of those things. So you're going to see that TikTok will start bringing this in because there's been demand from parents, from the media, etc. They will respond to that. This is how all apps start. So right now, that app is still wide open to being abused. So yes, of course, parents should be concerned. It's important.
And what about the privacy settings when it comes to TikTok? As a parent, can I make sure that I go through those? Is that what I must do to protect my child?
So you need to go and Google how to do this because for every app it's going to be different, for every device it's going to be different. So the bottom line is, yes, if you are going to give your child a smart device and they're allowed to go onto these social media apps, you have to have the conversation with your children around privacy settings, about sharing personal data, because that's also
What do you mean by personal data? Let parents know what that means.
Okay, so children are being asked when they sign up to social media apps to give their name, their location, their age, etc. They could even give their school. You don't have to give all of that information. Okay, so just be careful about how much information you provide and try and find out how that information is going to be used because, information is sold on to ad agencies, to search engines. And what young girls particularly tell me is that when they're on these social media apps, eventually, of course, advertising is rife.
Right.
And they are being targeted with diet pills at the age of 16. Wear a corset to be thinner. You name it. They are being targeted by things you and I will never see because the algorithm will play to the 16-year-old or the 15-year-old, and the algorithm is based on human behavior. We know what the fears of young girls are like, what their aspirations are, and all of that advertising will be targeted to those things, making them feel, in the words of a young friend of mine who was 17 when she told me this, less than I am and not good enough. And those are the important conversations we need to be having with our sons and our daughters. Not to believe everything they hear on social media, through advertising, to love yourself as you are.